What's happening with Iran right now is being completely misunderstood. If you've been told Iran is winning, that's not just wrong, it's propaganda. So get ready, watch, and listen, maybe even have a seat. I'm going to describe what's actually happening. Iran is claiming victory, but let's be honest, this isn't victory. This is a regime trying to survive the consequences of its own defeat. This is not Iran winning. This is a regime trying to survive, rebrand retreat as victory, and sell propaganda to its own people and to the world. I deal in facts. The United States and Israel launched one of the most decisive joint military campaigns in modern history, and the results are not theoretical. They are measurable. They struck Iran's nuclear infrastructure, Fordow, Natanz, Esfahan. They degraded its missile and air defense networks. They hit weapons production sites. They dismantled launch capabilities. They imposed enough pressure that Tehran agreed to a ceasefire, while the United States remains in position and ready to strike again if Iran refuses a real deal. And Israel made something else very clear. A ceasefire with Iran does not mean immunity for Hezbollah, nor should it mean immunity for any of the Islamic terror proxies Iran has funded and supported across the world. So here are the facts. Over 13,000 targets struck across Iran, 80% of air defense systems destroyed, 90% of weapons manufacturing wiped out, 80% of nuclear infrastructure hit, missile program functionality destroyed, more than 150 naval vessels destroyed or disabled, over 190 ballistic missile launchers eliminated, thousands of military personnel neutralized, and key leadership eliminated. The IDF eliminated 40 senior Iranian commanders in a single opening campaign, eradicating core elements of the regime's leadership and achieving aerial superiority deep in Iranian territory. That's not narrative. That's decimation. Now look at the proxy network. Hezbollah. Its leader Hassan Nasrallah eliminated, hundreds of targets struck in minutes, command centers destroyed, rocket infrastructure dismantled, elite units degraded, still exposed to continued Israeli operations. Hamas, leadership eliminated, Sinwar, Daif, command structure dismantled, capabilities severely degraded. Houthis, over 800 targets struck by U.S. forces, command and control destroyed, weapon systems eliminated, their ability to threaten global shipping significantly degraded. That's not symbolic. That's strategic dominance. And now look at what Israel is carrying, because this is not theoretical. This is not temporary. This is constant. Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, has been under sustained multi-front attack for decades. And for nearly 3 years, that war has intensified into an unrelenting barrage. Yes, October 7th, when Hamas murdered over 1,200 people and abducted over 250. That was a turning point. But it was not the beginning. And what followed has not stopped. Since then, Hamas continues to attack from Gaza. Hezbollah continues to attack from Lebanon. Iran launches and directs attacks. The Houthis fire from Yemen. This is a war on multiple fronts, happening simultaneously. Missiles, rockets, drones. And this is what much of the world still fails to grasp. This is not a war only against soldiers. This is a war against civilians, Jewish Israelis, Muslim Israelis, Christian Israelis, Druze communities, Baha'i communities, all under threat. Sirens go off constantly. Families run into bomb shelters constantly. Children grow up knowing exactly how many seconds they have to find cover constantly. This is not occasional. This is not episodic. This is constant. This is daily life. And yet, Israel continues to function as a democracy, elections, courts, civil society, while under fire. And on the front lines, the Israeli Defense Forces fight a sustained multi-front war against Iran's terror network, massively supported by the United States, because America understands something many still refuse to admit. This is the same war. This is not a war about territory, but a war for values, for existence. Because the goal of these Islamist terror movements is not coexistence, it's not a two-state solution, it's expansion, it's domination, it's the spread of Islamist control across the region. And yet, Iran claims victory, because authoritarian regimes do not admit defeat. They manufacture narratives. When terror regimes lose the battlefield, they try to win the headline. But this war is not only military, it is informational. Iran is exporting propaganda, manipulating activists around the world, influencing social and political movements, and flooding Western discourse and media with disinformation, especially within the far left and the far right, and in the Islamist Palestinianist supporters, and in the communist, Marxist, socialist, progressive movements and protests, long supported and funded by Iran, Russia, China, and their proxies. That's not activism. That's psychological warfare disguised as justice. Now, I will address leverage. Iran sits on the Strait of Hormuz, where roughly 1/5 of the world's oil flows. That's not just geography, that's economic blackmail. And this brings us to another reality. Iran is not just targeting Israel. Iran has repeatedly targeted Gulf nations through missile strikes, drone attacks, and proxy operations. Saudi Arabia, major oil facilities attacked, disrupting global energy markets. United Arab Emirates, missile and drone attacks targeting civilian and economic centers. Shipping routes in the Gulf, threatened, attacked, destabilized. And remember, 1/5 of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. So when Iran escalates, it's not just a regional threat. It's a global economic threat, which we've felt and seen. And yet many Gulf nations, many European nations, benefit from the United States and Israel confronting Iran, while staying on the sidelines. They benefit from protection, from deterrence, from stability created by others. But they're not stepping forward. That must change, because this is not just America's fight. This is not just Israel's fight. This is a shared threat, and it requires shared responsibility. And then they say, ceasefire. But what kind of ceasefire looks like this? Iran agrees to terms while continuing attacks through proxies and attacking itself, while issuing threats across the region, while planning and enabling attacks against the United States, Israel, and neighboring countries. That's not a ceasefire. That's strategic deception. So the ceasefire negotiations? These are confusing for many. How can the United States negotiate a ceasefire? How does a democratic republic negotiate with an authoritarian Islamic regime that openly calls for death to America, death to Israel, and the destruction of anyone it identifies as an infidel? Even after the so-called ceasefire that we've been speaking about, Iran continues to attack, firing missiles, rockets, and drones. Iran has targeted and struck Israel, U.S. installations across the region, Gulf nations, Arab countries, civilian military, and infrastructure across the region. So Israel has had to continue to defend itself and respond with precision strikes on ballistic missile sites and production infrastructure to eliminate ongoing threats. Iran's terror proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, ISIS, and others continue to attack Israel, the U.S., and regional neighbors. We've seen terror attacks inspired and funded by Iran's terror network, including Islamist and jihadi terrorists who committed attacks on U.S. soil, across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And here is the strategic reality. President Trump is not speaking the language of traditional diplomacy. He's speaking the language of coercive deterrence. I'll say that again, coercive deterrence. That's language meant to be understood by the Islamic regime of Iran, not just by Western diplomats. At the same time, it is framed to the American public as limited, targeted, and controlled, designed to force compliance, not to invite endless war. That's why this rhetoric is hard. That's why the military pressure is real, and the message is unmistakable. Comply, or the next round will be worse. And that leads to an unavoidable conclusion. The United States cannot and must not step back now. It must continue this fight with clarity, consistency, and resolve, because the objective is clear. There is no victory in a pause. There is no victory in a headline. There is no victory in a temporary ceasefire. Victory means final. And final means this: the complete dismantling of the Islamic regime in Iran, the eradication of the IRGC, the full decimation of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Not weakened, not contained, ended. Because these are not conventional democratic actors. These are not negotiating partners. These are ideologically committed to the destruction of the United States, to the destruction of Israel, to the destruction of any civilization they define as infidel. Clarity is important. You do not negotiate with a regime whose goal is your destruction. You do not compromise with terror. You defeat it completely. Because anything less is not a solution. It's a delay. A regime built on bad faith cannot be negotiated with in good faith. And here is what the world must confront. Gulf nations, European countries, they benefit from this fight, from the stability, security, and deterrence created by the United States and Israel. But where are they? They benefit from the shield, but do not step onto the battlefield. They rely on strength they did not help create. And yet, what does that prove? It proves the strength of two nations, one massive, one small, standing at the forefront of a civilizational war. America and Israel are defending democracy and civilization itself. And here's the wake-up call the world cannot ignore. This war is not contained to Israel. This war is not contained to the Middle East. It is global. Just look at the pattern. United States, Washington, D.C., Michigan, New York City, Colorado, Chicago, New Orleans, thousands of attacks, over 9,000 anti-Semitic incidents in 1 year, more than one every hour. These attacks are linked to anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish extremism, radicalized ideological movements that are anti-Judeo-Christian values, democracy, and civilization as we know it. They are anti-America, across Europe, across Australia, across Africa. Churches attacked, synagogues attacked, civilians targeted. This is a global jihadist movement. This is not Israel's war. This is not America's war. This is the world's war. And here's an uncomfortable truth, especially for Western activists. You may not like the Trump administration. That is your right. That is any of our rights. But that's not the point. The point is results. What is happening now is what should have been done years ago. And the result is clear. A weakened regime, a degraded terror network, restored deterrence. This is not only good for America, it's good for the world. And let's be clear about something else. Because while we talk about strategy, policy, and geopolitics, there are people, real people, on the front lines of this fight. Israeli and American service members, men and women who put on the uniform, who deploy into danger, who operate in the most hostile environments in the world, so that we can live in freedom, so that we can have this conversation, so that democracy survives. And too often, we overlook that. We argue politics, we debate policy, but they are the ones carrying the mission. They are the real heroes, the real influencers, not commentators. They're protectors, defenders, warriors. And you know what? Here in America, every American, regardless of politics, should understand this. Our military is not just defending territory. They're defending our way of life. And in this fight, alongside Israel, they are defending something bigger than borders. They're defending freedom. They're defending democracy. They're defending civilization itself. And for that, they deserve our respect. They deserve our gratitude. And they deserve our support. And you know, to the Iranian and Persian people, this moment matters. Because while the regime projects strength, it is managing humiliation. While it claims victory, it is absorbing loss. The regime is doing what failing dictatorships do, lying about defeat, clinging to slogans, and hoping the world forgets what just happened. But the world is watching. The greatest victims of this regime are the Iranian people themselves. For over 4 decades, Iranians have lived under oppression imposed by Ayatollahs, the regime, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Hundreds of thousands imprisoned. Tens of thousands executed or disappeared. Generations silenced, surveilled, and brutalized. This is not geopolitical, this is human. And now the regime is weakened, exposed, under pressure. Regimes fall when they are weakest, not when they are loudest. This is a moment of truth. For Iranians inside Iran, for Persians and Iranians across the world, because no foreign power can reclaim a nation for its people. That responsibility belongs to the people themselves. Azadi. And now, Azadiye Iran dar dastan shomast. Freedom for Iran is in your hands. Take back your country. And the truth is this. America and Israel shattered capabilities. They eliminated leadership. They weakened the terror network. They restored deterrence. Iran is not projecting strength. It is managing humiliation. And history is not written by those who shout the loudest. It is written by those who rise, reclaim, and win.